All right, so there's very little preamble this week because there's not a ton to say about this one. So lately we've been going through these early BBC things, and I was saying how I never know what's going to come up. I'm just trying to sift through this stuff and see what happens. But it's annoyingly random. Like no one has really. If there is some big essay somebody wrote about this whole period of history, I don't know where to find it. Because so the thing we watched last week, remember it was the 1946 in review, because the BBC had shut down for 7 years due to the war. Then they came back and they did a retrospective of the first year back. And they said at the end, like, there's 1946 in the books. And they closed the book and put it on the shelf. And we will do one next year and every year henceforth for the chronicling the BBC. So that clip, it turns out, actually was uploaded by the BBC themselves. It wasn't just some random person who had it. That was the BBC. So presumably if they had any more, they would have uploaded those as well. But that 1946 one is the only one that was on archive.org. And again, like, as far as not chronicling this stuff, like, it would be nice if there was a description in the upload of, like, how come there's no more? Or were there more? My theory is, like, because that was obviously shot on film, and we found out they didn't start recording to tape till 1958 or something. So if they did do more, either they didn't do more, or if they did, maybe they weren't recorded, like, shot on film, so maybe they just didn't have them anymore. I don't know. It'd be nice if I could know, but there's just it's like there's just this random mess of stuff. And no.
So you didn't put in something like BBC retrospective 1947?
Well, basically what I'm doing on archive.org is I've just set it to search for BBC, and then you can whittle down the search. So I took out all the audio, because I was saying, like, last week there was a lot of records and stuff that were on BBC Radio. So just video. And then I'm just going through year by year. So 1946 was that thing. 1947 was nothing. 1948, nothing. 1940, just nothing until, 1949 is the next thing that I found. And even this is tenuous. This is weird. So again, it's like slippery. It's like an eel, like trying to hold on to the history of the BBC, but it's just a lot of big gaps and not a lot of explanation as to, I assume the explanation is just, they just don't have this stuff anymore. There's probably no more to it than that. But it would be nice to have a little more information about why there's so little. So what we did find, this almost seems like something that I probably would have skipped normally, because it's another Sherlock Holmes pilot. And if you remember, we did one before. It was an unaired Sherlock Holmes pilot from 1951.
Yeah.
And it was relatively well done, I think. Like, it was where they had actual outdoor shots and horses and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they had a lot of scene changes in that one, as I remember, 7 or 8.
Yeah, and that was just one that never got aired at all. Where this one, it's hard to say that it's even a BBC thing, except that it's in the BBC search. So I assume, and it's Sherlock Holmes, I think it originated from England. But what happened with this one, it was a little earlier. It was 1949. And it's one of the books was called The Adventure of the Speckled Band, or one of the stories. So this is that story, that Sherlock Holmes story. So yeah, this was originally created as yet another pilot series for some Sherlock Holmes films. And what they did with this one, because we've run into this before too, is it aired on the NBC series Your Showtime, where I think the one we watched before was called Alcoa Theater, where it was just different random things each week. And they would sneak in unaired pilots as episodes of the anthology. So that's what happened with this one. They had this unaired Sherlock Holmes pilot, so they just threw it in as an episode of the NBC series Your Showtime. So it aired in America, but I presume because it's in the BBC listing on archive.org, it must have been a British production on some level, but maybe not. Again, it's so hard to figure out what I'm looking at, It's like it's just a big bunch of stuff, and the actual story behind these things is hard to say. So this one is double weird. It's Sherlock Holmes, which we've already done a Sherlock Holmes thing from only 2 years later, and it's not quite BBC. It actually aired in America, but I'm just there's so little, there's such rags of this era of BBC. I'm like, that'll have to do. That's what we got for this week. So
Okay, well, let's check it out.
The repairs to the other room set me on the track. However, I didn't know that the snake was going to be there.
Okay.
Why does this animal always pick on me? Elementary, my dear.
So who was it? The stepfather who arranged all this?
Yeah, although I don't really know why. So yeah, that was kind of weird. The Sherlock Holmes plot was that some lady got killed because her stepdad put an exotic snake through a hole in the wall that bit her, but they didn't really explain what he had to gain from this murder. So I don't know, whatever, I guess.
I found it very, very disjointed.
Yes.
Even with the narrator.
Yeah, it seemed partially British and partially American. Very hard to tell what was going on with that. So anyway, yeah, there was another Sherlock Holmes pilot, which was worse than the other one that also...
Usually your thing for a plot is who, how, when, and why. Okay, who, why, who knows why.
I'm sure it's like in the story, it probably all kind of makes more sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's always the classic thing too of like, I've never enjoyed writing from that era because the classic one is like Dickens and it's like, well, he did get paid by the word. It's like, yeah, well, I'm not getting paid by the word to read it, So I don't need all this fucking extraneous nonsense. That's what it felt like. It's like that type of thing. So the actual television, I would say, is of very little note this week. But I guess what is a little more interesting, I did find how I was saying that it's annoying that I can't piece these things together better and get a better picture of what was going on with the BBC at this time. So I did do a little search and I found that there are Wikipedia entries for each year of British television that do help clear things up a little bit. So I guess I'll like work this into my research, but mainly I guess what it confirms is that there really wasn't anything going on. Like the reason there's this gap and that there's no shows to be found is because there just really wasn't any. So for instance, 1947 in British television, in February, BBC's only been back for less than a year. The BBC television service is temporarily suspended for the first time since World War II due to a national fuel crisis. So already it's done again, and there's nothing else happens till November when they have the cenotaph. so that year's a wash. There definitely also explains why they seemingly didn't continue the what happened each year. Because in 1947, we shut down due to the fuel crisis, and we barely came back by the end of the year. So yeah, and we can go through these highlights of TV. Won't take long because there's very few. November 1947, they showed the marriage of Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth to Prince Philip.
And it was viewed
47.
by an estimated 400,000 viewers. So they were getting up there already with like a lot of...
They were definitely still rationing in 1947 because there's stories about how people gave their coupons they turned them into somewhere so that it could be converted into money to buy silk so that the princess at that time, her dress, to contribute to her dress and to contribute to her wedding.
Wow. What a bunch of simps. I wouldn't do that shit. Deal with your own dress, lady. So then 1948, the television newsreel begins. The first Olympic coverage happens that year. That's it. That's it for the whole year. Like, again, just nothing. And they've got a list of like, okay, so for instance, 1948, debuting shows, just the television newsreel, continuing shows, BBC Wimbledon, For the Children, which is some kids show, Picture Page, the boat race, BBC Cricket, just all this type of sports shit. Something called Kaleidoscope, Muffin the Mule, and Cafe Continental. And I looked up some of these individual shows, and a lot of these do have a listing on their wiki page about their preservation efforts. And it's either nothing exists, or there was one show that said the BBC has like 3 episodes on Kinescope, but there's no link to where you can watch them. They just have them in their archives. So yeah, there's just barely anything on TV. So that's 1948. And then since this was 1949, this year, BBC Television revives the regular television weather forecast. They didn't even have the weather regularly until 1949.
And didn't we see one of those? Yeah, the guy, he had this black and white map. Of course, everything was black and white. And we saw a little spritz on that.
And in 1949, they started broadcasting Come Dancing, a TV ballroom dancing competition. So that's kind of the original American Idol. That's where all that shit started. And in October, How Do You View, the first comedy series on British TV. And then in December 1949, a TV transmitter opened in the Midlands, making it the first part of the UK outside of London to be able to receive the BBC. So that brings us up to where we were in 1949. So yeah, like the fact that there was nothing on archive.org makes sense, because when you look at it that way, it's like, yeah, just not much going on. Very slow start.
And two, you got a country that's recovering from a world war. They probably had a whole lot of other things that they were having to deal with, like rationing, lack of jobs, repairing all that damage that happened.
Yeah.
So TV probably was considered pretty frivolous.
So I guess on the plus side, this is skipping us through the early years very quickly, because there's just nothing there. The only reason this thing was there is because it was partnered with NBC, or this wouldn't exist either. So who knows, next week I'll see if I can find anything from 1950, but if not, we'll just go as far as we got to go.
Looking ahead.
Until something shows up. But this is kind of neat, because like I said before too, is because we kind of jumped in with American television. I didn't try to start from the very start, because that'd be even more nebulous and weird. So it is kind of neat that even though this is very scattered and spotty or whatever, you know, we really did start at the start of British TV. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, we're already up to 1950, because there's not much.
A whole lot happening.
Yep.
And when you consider that CBC didn't start until 1952, I think it was. So
And I presume
I guess
if
there was
we
nothing happening in Canada.
if we ever actually go down the Canadian branch, it's going to be even less documented, I assume, because it seems like with that like 1946 year in review, it's like England wanted to keep records of this stuff. They just couldn't or didn't, you know, but at least they tried. I can't imagine that Canada even had enough sense of, you know, like BBC has this kind of like, we're the BBC, you know, and the radio heritage, and like, this is important. Where I just have a feeling Canada probably did not have that vibe.
Oh, well, you know, they were the colonies.
Yeah.
Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India, they were all the colonies. So they looked to the mothership to
Yeah.
take charge and this stuff and create this stuff.
Anyway, that's for our Canadian branch. Next week, we'll continue down the Britain line and see what happens.